Now it is my pleasure, as Rabbi Sarah Berman, Director of Adult Education here at Central Synagogue, to hand things over to my colleague, my friend, Rabbi Ari Lorge, to take us into today's program. Ari, thanks for being here.
So glad to be here, and real privilege to be part of one of these three panels that have been ongoing and that have had ongoing themes, ongoing questions, ongoing challenges that have tied all of them together. These panels were put together really with 6 goals in mind. One is to address this issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, to learn and really highlight that there aren't 2 sides. There are a multivocal multiplicity of voices and viewpoints and stories and narratives that are a part of this, and trying to really lean into that nuance and to also lean into hearing and listening. Also wanting to also hear directly from people who are on the ground trying to shape this conversation, and from people who are really there in person doing this work. We also want to empower ourselves as American Jews to get a sense of where is our role in the unfolding issues, in the unfolding stories, in the conversation, where and how can we be a part of this work, and to expose ourselves to a lot of different organizations doing work, knowing that maybe we'll find organizations whose missions and strategies and stories might encourage us to dive deeper into our own sense of activism, our own sense of where we fit in this wider story. And for this third panel, really, like Rabbi Berman said, instead of a multiplicity of panelists, we have one organization with 2 incredible panelists. These are, we have with us really the co-founders of Combatants for Peace. And where I want to really start is asking the 2 of you to introduce yourselves and your story, right? To introduce your story to us, and in specific, right, your story is, we don't have enough time to hear all of your story, but specifically the story that brought you to this organization. The next question I'll ask you is to tell us a little bit about the organization, but don't start there, please. Start with your stories, the stories that brought you to this work and to the creation of this organization. Which one of you would like to start? Chen, Suli, Chen.
Thank you, Rabbi Ari. I can start. Good morning, good evening, everyone, and thanks for hosting us here. This evening, it's 7 o'clock in the land here, so I assume it's noon for you there. So this is really also important conversation for us as well at this time specifically. So we're really honored to be with you. And in short cut, my name is Suleiman Khatib, as you can see in the screen. I live in Ramallah. I'm speaking from Ramallah together with my friend and partner Chen Alon, Tel Aviv, not far away from here, by the way, physically. So my background, basically, I born in Jerusalem area. My family lives outside of Jerusalem, like 10 minutes from the center of Jerusalem. I'm 50 years old, 51. And basically, I started my activism, to say, when I was a child, from the age of 13, 14. At the time, I joined what we call the armed resistance against the occupation. And in short, at the age of 14, I was drawn to armed struggle. Since we are talking here about different narratives, that's my side of the story. And of course, that means, using all kinds of means that I could use when I was 14, from throwing stones, cocktail Molotov, and attacking 2 Israelis in order to take their weapon to use it. The idea that the only way for freedom and liberation is using arm or violence. So I ended up in jail when I was 14 and 5 months. I spent 10 years and a half in jail, in Israeli jail, like my teenager time. Through the jail time, quickly, I participated a few times in different actions to improve the daily life in jail, specifically hunger strikes. We used to do a lot of hunger strikes to improve the daily life in jail for like 15 days, 16 days. The first one, I was 15 years old. And that's how I got to know about nonviolence and that nonviolence works. And it's really still one of the hardest thing, how to convince people that nonviolence works. And for me, this was a practical experience, actually. And the second thing I would say, I come from a family that's really rooted in this land. And so many of us has been in jail or active, even you spoke about the 75 years of Israel, which is, feels to, when I put the Palestinian hat, it's just the Nakba side, the other side of the story. So it's really important for me to mention, how do we receive these words from a Palestinian hat? It means like, losing home, basically. So we'll speak later, I guess, how could we reach a point where we can all celebrate these anniversaries and feel winners. That's, I think, for later. Yeah, as I said, I'm very connected to this place as my family for hundreds of years. So cultural-wise, folklore, struggle. So I guess it's a mission to serve this cause. And, the strategies change. And for me, like through the time in jail and after, I was transformed to believe in nonviolence and also finding partners in what we call the other side. As you know, working with the enemy is not something simple. I believe you've been hosting joint organizations, and generally all these organizations face challenges from both sides in different ways. We can speak about that later also, because that's not the mainstream ideas here. Since I was out of jail, I was released when I was like 25 almost. I'm active all my life, so I continue to pursue nonviolence and also finding Israeli partners. And so I'm honored to be part of the founding of Combatants for Peace that started from ex-combatants. I guess we'll talk about it in the next question. I'm turning the microphone to Khen from here. تفضل حبيبي.
Thank you, Suli, and thank you, Rabbi, and thank you all for joining us. As Suli said, it's not only an honor for us, it's important, it's crucial for us to tell you how much we need partners such as yourselves, all of you, especially the Jewish community in the US, but we are trying to activate to see the world not as spectators to our conflict, but to transform our spectators into spectators. You can hear that I'm a theater maker, creator, and I wanna give you the background of how I got to Combatants for Peace. As an all-Israeli Jewish boy and as a civilian or as a citizen, but as a theater maker as well, because I think it relates to my practice. So as I've said, I'm an all-Israeli boy. I'm in Tel Aviv right now. I grew up in a Zionist family, Holocaust survivors from my grandparents. They left Europe because they were Zionist, and it's the only reason why that they survived. All my grandfather and grandmother's family all the relatives were murdered in the Holocaust. And I grew up with Never Again, and I think you all know, I mean, the myths of all the myth that we are growing up on here in Israel. So my father was a combatant soldier, and it was almost clear to me that I didn't have any questions about that, and I want to follow his footsteps to become a combatant soldier, to join the army, to become a war hero, to save the only shelter that the Jewish people have which is the state of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, the only Jewish democratic state in the Middle East. So I had these images of me serving my shift in the army and then continue with my life as an artist, because I knew since a very early age that I'm going to be an artist, a theater maker or a creator. And then I joined the army. Unfortunately, the images of tanks and saving the only shelter for the Jewish people changed or transformed into, I was drafted to the army in the very beginning of the first Intifada, Palestinian uprising, 1987, 88. And I served 4 years in the army because I volunteered and I became an officer in the tank unit. But most of the time in those 4 years between 87 to 91, 92, I was actually a police officer imposing curfews, beating demonstrators with batons, invading houses, arresting children, arresting people, hundreds of arrestments that I've committed myself, and invading houses in the middle of the night. And so for me, the occupation, I realized, I mean, I didn't have any concept of the occupation, and all of a sudden I'm part of it for 4 very, very intensive 4 years. But then the fuel of the never again and the only shelter that we have, and following my father's footsteps, was so strong for me that I, of course, like any other man in Israel, you know, there's a mandatory service and then a mandatory reserve service, a month a year. So I was released from the army and served very proudly a month a year in reserve. And then again, no less tanks trainings and more occupation, but luckily there was a peace process, 93, Rabin and Arafat are signing the peace agreement. And but again, I'm finding myself a month a year, while I was a student in acting school and then later on a professional actor in the repertory theater. 11 months a year, I'm a citizen, artist, humanist in a democratic state, you know, demonstrating, creating, part of the uncensored culture and so on, and theater. And 1 month a year, I'm an officer. I became, after 10 years in reserve duty, a major. 1 month a year, I'm an officer of a military dictatorship. 3.5 million Palestinians until 2006, when we withdrew from Gaza or disengaged from Gaza. It was natural for me, you know, I'm a citizen of a democratic state, and then I'm commanding my soldiers while there's a peace process and while we are seeing a month a year, you know, in time jumps of 11 months, we see the Jewish settlements expanding, double itself from 93 to 2007 years. While we are in peace process, Israel is expanding, doubling the numbers of settlers and so on, but still the fuel of never again and the rationalization or the rationalization of I'm an officer of an army of a democratic state is so strong that I'm not even thinking of saying no or changing the system. And along these years, I'm arresting people, imposing curfews. I mean, the occupation continues while there is a peace process and more checkpoints, more roadblocks. And then in 2000, Ehud Barak and Arafat came back after the Camp David summit, and they told us, I'm sorry, we don't have a solution. We apologize, but we have no partner. That's why Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who I was very active in his campaign, because he promised to continue the peace process with the Palestinians. He came and he said, no way to achieve peace. So I realized in September 2000, as a major already in a tank battalion, that this is going to be my life in the next 10 years in reserve duty. And my children will serve the occupation and their children will serve the occupation, and we will expand settlements. We will occupy Palestinians for for eternity because there is no partner, there is no solution. And I felt that this is a lie, because I knew that there is a way to achieve peace. And maybe there is no partner, but maybe we are not the partner. So I decided that I'm going to do something. I didn't know what I'm going to do, but then I got a call for another reserve duty, April 2001. In this reserve duty, I thought maybe I will refuse to serve and so on. And all my armed brothers and friends and colleagues from the unit said, don't decide yet. Come to the reserve duty and decide when you see what happened. It already was the second Intifada armed struggle, very bloody armed struggle. And that was a different ballgame. I mean, there were suicide attacks. There were already, we sieged and blocked towns and villages and cities in the Palestinian occupied territories. There were a lot of shootings in our region. I was in charge of the region of village Husan and the area of Bethlehem. And then it was a different ballgame in a way that I myself, now in retrospective, I can say that I've committed crimes according to the international law. I prevented of children to going to hospital. We demolished a family house in El Khader, in the village of El Khader, and many, many, many other things. But in April 2001, I decided to refuse to serve the occupation. And in January 2002, we signed the petition, 50 combatant soldiers and officers. A week later, we were 100. 2 weeks later, we were 200. And then we got to 400. And then it was kind of an explosive phenomenon in the Israeli public. Some of you probably remember, but we were all still in the uninational psyche, Jewish, Israeli, Zionist mainstream, saying, you know, we are addressing our message to the Israeli society. The occupation is the destruction of the state of Israel, the only democracy, the democratic Jewish state, and so on. And then someone told us in 2004 that, you know, there is a second Intifada, 3 years of fighting, a very bloody, a lot of killed and wounded people on both sides. Somebody said, you know, that there is a parallel group in the Palestinian side. People like you credited, okay, now not major, but they were 10 years in jail for stabbing Israeli soldiers. And they refused to be part of the violent struggle for the liberation of Palestine. They are against the suicide attacks, against harming and killing innocent people. So we started to meet with them, and then we founded, it took us a year to found Combatants for Peace, because it took us a year to build a trust and to realize that we are going to walk this path together. In one hand, in the path of rehumanization, dialogue, reconciliation, and in the other hand, developing a community that struggles and resists the occupation and the apartheid in non-violent means only. We are committed to non-violence because we are all post-traumatic and wounded from the violence. We know that violence causes only more violence. And along these years, maybe we will have time for later on, I realized that I left the repertory theater and the culture that was for me preserving the same narrative. And Suli and I and others in Combatants for Peace are no longer accepting the equilibrium of zero-sum game or my narrative or your narrative, but we've developed this third narrative that is not either or, but a mutual joint narrative and a mutual joint community of Israelis and Palestinians. And maybe later on, I will have some time to talk about theater, how theater is implemented in these two journeys.
Thank you both so much for distilling your stories down, for having us get a sense of how the two of you, but also the larger movement got together. Your core principles of nonviolence, of dialogue, a commitment to multiple narratives that can exist side by side. What is the work of your group, Combatants for Peace? What do you do? What's the strategy, right? What is the strategy that you employ to try to bring about peace? What is it that the organization does? give us like an introduction to the organization.
Okay, so we can maybe both add something to the question. So I guess in a somehow similar and different to the other organizations, joint organizations, you know, like to just understand the map, there are not so many joint work to start. It's a very exceptional that the system built on separation. So basically,
Just to make sure we all are clear, when you say joint work, what do you mean?
yeah. So when we talk about joint spaces and joint work, it means a Palestinian and Israeli organization working together. And here it's maybe important to mention, as I said, this is not a common thing. And second, this is also recognizing the power dynamic in the bigger picture. It's very important to mention that. And also to respect that different, you know, cultural part of things. So among this, I guess the joint work, the binationalism is really a central part of Combatants for Peace values, which means, for example, you know, we have two directors, like one Palestinian, one Israeli. We had two people from each side for almost every team and every committee. So basically, every decision we take, we have to bring agreement of both sides. This is very important, and it's not obvious. And it has its own opportunities and challenges, this joint, and all the languaging and everything. I would say also in the philosophy part and the ideology and the strategy of Combatants for Peace, as Khin mentioned, like we basically the founders of Combatants for Peace were either an Israeli army or ex-Palestinian prisoners activists. So that gives the organization some kind of you know, identity, I would say, and maybe some credibility because of the background. And this is maybe what Combatants for Peace bring to the table of these joint organizations, because the fact that you were in the Israeli army or in the Palestinian side, you were in jail, you consider kind of a hero. Of course, you will still criticize, but that gives you some legitimacy. I think since we started and we developed through the years, there is direct action work, which is basically non-violence demonstrations and solidarity action on the ground, and because that's really important. And there's a lot of work around the narrative and the stories to get to know each other. We use a lot of personal stories, like what we did here, actually. And this tool developed with the years, where we're coming from, how do we transform, and so on. It's maybe important to mention here also, Combatants for Peace has changed through the years to welcome non-armed or non-prisoners people, normal people to say. So there are all kinds of people now, and there is also younger generation, and the two directors, the Palestinian director is a female that was not in jail, you know, so that's important to say. And I think it's kind of, you can describe it in one hand, struggling against the system or the order that's based on separation and occupation, and creating also a hopeful future for our peoples by creating this new narrative that can mention. And maybe just to say the last to highlight the last two big events which Khin directed, the main one of them, the joint Palestinian-Israeli Memorial Day. And as you can imagine, I would say mourning and like the victims of your enemy, this is beyond imagination. And I don't think it's even exist in any conflict zone. Since we are talking about a conflict zone now, we're not talking about post-conflict. And Khin can speak more to it because he directed this since 18 years. Like one of the most sacred events that we have every year since 18 years. But also we had the Nakba ceremony, the joint Nakba ceremony. So you can see in our language, maybe the joint is important to always to us. And this we do it with both Palestinian and Israeli in the last like 3-4 years. We started, of course, again, everything very controversial because we're touching very, like what it's called, like a red line in this or that society. So there is a lot of anger, to say, from people on either side. And this is also maybe important to mention that there is no rosy road. And I believe the journey together is as important as like the end goal, what's called. Ken?
Thank you. Chen, do you want to add any?
Yeah, I want to add just one thing, that we have various modes of activities such as tours and house meetings, and we have two peace schools on both sides that are interacting. You know, Madrasat Huria and Midreshet Dror. We are, from our experience and knowledge, we are training and sharing a lot of our experience with young generation, because Suli and I are over 50 and we are almost 20 years in this journey, and we feel that there is an amazing young generation. So we invest a lot of energy and time and money in this. We are, as Suli mentioned, these two events that are huge. The Israeli-Palestinian Memorial Service. I've directed the first one and the last one, and all the ceremonies in between. We started in a fringe theater with 70 people in Tel Aviv. And the last one, we had 15,000 people. The biggest Israeli-Palestinian is the biggest memorial ceremony in Israel that exists right now. And yeah, a lot of direct actions like water campaign in the south of Mount Hebron. We have the fact that we have representatives in all over Israel and the West Bank allows us to open up regional groups and to found specific and concrete activities that are kind of answering the real problems and the current problems of Palestinians that are suffering from the occupation and the apartheid. So we are, just to highlight this, that we are investing a lot in dialogue, reconciliation, and education, and in direct actions and actual resistance to the occupation.
So I'm hearing there's trust building, dialogue, internal work in the society to bring people together. And then once that trust is established, using that to be able to do direct action together that might also educate the wider communities and also maybe even create change. Is that right?
Not really, because what we found 18 years ago is that these are not parallel paths.
Yeah.
So there is not either or in these two strategies. The dialogue, the reconciliation, the rehumanization process is actually intertwined and even nurturing and support the direct action and the resistance, and vice versa. So that creates some kind of an holistic model of they are not parallel, but they are intertwined and interdependent, actually.
And you said 20-ish years of work together. And so a couple questions, and in a second, we'll move to more community questions, but a question and a few related ones that have come up. I hear you both talking about criticism from the communities for doing this work. So what is the criticism? What is the voice of the anger for the work? You said that the people get angry about this work, defensive about this work, they're critical of this work. Where does that come from? What's the, what is it that people are saying when they are critical of it? And what have you seen change in 20 years?
Okay, so like as we spoke, like when we started this path, we knew this is not a popular thing and easy way to basically work together hand in hand with supposedly the enemy. And the context, this is not accepted in any conflict zone, right? So to say. And we are not exceptional to this rule, actually. We work with organization in Ireland that's very similar to Combatants for Peace from both sides, and they actually have faced the same problem. And they both white Christian Europeans, not Jewish, not Arab. So it's not exclusive for us to say. Of course, the challenge, I would say, like there are different criticism. And Khin can speak about in the Israeli side more. You know, like some of the criticism, like how dare you are to put our blood equally to the blood of the occupiers, or the other way around, in different ways. This is something we just read about even after the Memorial Day. We had gotten a Facebook attack from important group here. I just don't want to go there now so much, but criticizing the Memorial Day and criticizing the Nakba ceremony, and actually also lying on some of our positions. So I'm not sure they even read what we say, you know, about the power dynamic issue, for example. So for many people, I would say the mainstream Palestinian, the reconciliation process has to happen after ending the occupation. So definitely this is a legitimate opinion. You know, I have also some of my family are not happy with this, what we're doing. So, and some neighbors, I believe it's really fine, like that sometimes people are triggered to see that we are working with Israeli partners, and this triggered them like from their comfortable zone. I personally have a lot of empathy and understanding for people that can't even imagine this in one way. And the other way, it's also upsetting that for some people, like they would write that we are no longer like a fully Palestinian or a fully Israelis. And the person that write this can be sitting in a bar doing nothing. So that's also something to mention. I usually more privileged people are more radical, and that's maybe where the upsetting part. And they don't have necessarily to be even Palestinian or Israelis. We face that. Sometimes it comes to threats or to public shaming, and this, of course. And this is, can mention Madras al-Hurriya, the Freedom School. Like a few months ago, there was a Palestinian writer a journalist, he wrote against the Freedom School. The members of the Freedom School, the cohort, are younger people, like 18 to 25, and they were scared. These are like young people, and they're scared for their name, for the shaming in their community, in their school. Yeah, and as we speak always, like you have to lose, there is no other way, I would say, like you have to lose some people and some public spaces that you are no longer welcome. At the same time, like as we speak, creating a new community beyond this system border building, like in advance. So that's where you could feel free despite all this criticism.
It sounds like there's been growth in the organization. Schools have opened up, chapters have opened up, more people have joined in. Not everyone needs to be a combatant. What else has changed in the 20 years? Have you seen a change in public opinion? Have you seen a change in, you feel like the work is impacting policy? Like what do you see after 20 years of the work?
First of all, I want to say one word about the opposition or the resistance that we get in the Israeli side. And I just want to say that along the years, I realized that, after 4 years in the army, 10 years in reserve duty, growing up the way I grew up with my family, the education system and so on, nothing can be more difficult for me than the voices that I heard in my head before refusing and before partnering with Suli, with this terrorist, dangerous man, So, for me, these voices were so strong and so difficult to get over it that none of my, no one, oh, do you hear me? Is there a problem?
We can hear you. You're cutting in a bit, but we could hear you before just fine.
Okay. So I said nothing can be more difficult for me than these voices. So when my friends from the army or just friends from the life of or family members when they blamed me for being a traitor and so on, it wasn't as difficult because I knew who I am, and I knew what I did. And along the years, you know, the partnership and the trust and the vision that we are not only having together, Suli and I, all the rest of the, you know, friends and colleagues from in the movement, but we are embodying the vision. So when you feel that you are embodying something that is in this, it's the accusation. Soon as another question.
Ken, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. The last thing we heard was that you said the power comes from feeling like you're embodying the vision.
Yeah. So I think it was almost the end. I mean, I felt that it's such a powerful experience, and to do it with partners, with Palestinian partners, and to build this trust gives you a lot of power and hope, and to resist the accusation and being blamed as a traitor.
Michal has been collecting questions from the community, and we'd love to make sure we have time for some of them. So I'm going to invite her to share some of the questions that have come up.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, Chen and Suli, so much for everything you were saying. We have a lot of questions, and I don't think we'll get time to all of them. So I'm going to try and combine some of the questions. We got a lot of questions asking about the current government and asking about the judicial reform overhaul, however we want to use it, and really asking, are you part of the demonstrations? Are you part of the program that is sort of either against or for this judicial overhaul? And also, if there is, I'm trying to think how to phrase it, is it affecting you? Is the current government's policy, is it affecting you? Is it encouraging more people to join or maybe hurting your position? So it's kind of a two-part question. So whoever would like to answer.
So I assume this is a more question for me because Suli maybe will say something about this, but the Palestinians in the occupied territories are not part of this campaign, and in this, I would say, wave of mass demonstrations. Today, specifically today, there's a disruption day, and I've been in the streets for hours, and like any other, like other dozens of thousands of people, it's huge, it's really massive. And right after our session, I'm going to go to Habima Square, where there is another disruption mass demonstration in Tel Aviv, the biggest that collects all day activities. I even hear the noises from the big demonstration. There is a problem with it because the criticism of the anti-occupation camp, which is very small, is that this call or this struggle for democracy is a kind of a democracy for Jews only. it's preserving the Jewish supremacy. And a lot of this struggle is addressed to the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews, and not addressing the settlers and the right-wing extremists that are really controlling this government. So we are consisting and to be on the ground, to be part of all demonstrations. We have an anti-occupation bloc. This is how we define ourselves. We've signed again, there is no such thing as a democracy with occupation. And we are raising the awareness. I have to say, from my personal experience, that we got in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of mass demonstrations, we get a lot of hostility by the mainstream demonstrators saying, it has nothing to do with the occupation. Take off the Palestinian flags, take off the signs that are speaking about the occupation and apartheid, and after the attack of Hawara, when the Minister of Treasure said that Israel should wipe out, or that Hawara should be wiped out by the settlers, by the extremist Jewish terrorists there, something has been changed. And the mass demonstration was very, very tolerant, or much more tolerant, and started to understand the deep sense of there is no such thing as a democracy with occupation. There is no such thing as a democracy with apartheid regime or military regime that is controlling over 3 million Palestinians. And I think that's something that started to diffuse in the mainly tolerance. I mean, they haven't been activated and started to, the mainstream demonstrations are still democracy, Israeli flags and so on. But I feel that as long as it's already 3-4 months now, I think that the issue of occupation is getting more and more awareness.
Thank you. Chen, so if you have anything to add to this, or we can go to our next question.
No, you can go to the next question.
Okay. So we have a lot of questions that you kind of already answered about the backlash from your community, and you did bring it up, but there is one question. I'm actually going to read it because there's a full paragraph into it. That you say a lot about joint organizations, joint events, shared cities, yet there is an observance of a goal of what we call separate but equal. Meaning that there is still only one narrative taught in schools, separate Arab and Israeli schools, separate neighborhoods, only one language taught, and no real opportunity for people to meet and get to know each other. So the question is there a real opportunity for change? Is there really a way of creating these joint things that you are talking about and creating these joint projects with everything that's happening? There's also a reference to the national law, or Chok HaLe'om, and I would love to hear your perspectives on this sort of notion. I don't know, I think if Esuli would like to start.
Yeah, thank you. So I actually was talking about joint spaces, not joint cities, just to clear, because so definitely there is a big room for change for sure, and that's why we do what we do. I have in the personal experience seen changes in many radical movements and many radical situations. I would say this, firstly, there is no privilege. I don't feel privileged to lose hope. That's to start. In a practical level, I am personally optimistic by my nature. That's maybe my luck, but also I think this is the only option. I'm aware this is a long way to go to heal the trauma of generations and individuals here, and to create more peaceful life among the different communities that lives in the land. I think we need like a historical I also think there is no 1 minute like a decision that can change the history. It's a whole journey, but definitely I think we need steps of recognition of the rights of people that basically lived here, as simple as that. That's why when even we talk about the demonstrations in Israel about the reform, no Palestinian here feel included. It doesn't have anything to do with us directly. So basically, it's a democracy for one group. And I think this is an old order, and I really like one of the hosts of the memorial event, Yussi Sabari, a singer, said something really stuck with me. I'm no longer serving the old order. This old order is just serving certain group, and it's not peace. And that's why maybe you mentioned the Disturbing the Peace, the movie that was made a few years ago about Combatants for Peace. It's important maybe to think what they mean by the word peace. Actually, it was a non-violence demonstration, and the army has arrested Khen and Muhammad, one Palestinian, one Israeli, And when we asked them why you arrest them, they said, because you're disturbing the peace of the occupier, the peace of the order of the system. That's not really true peace. For me, like there is a different level of work until we are free, all of us here and elsewhere, hopefully. And the liberation among Palestinian and Israelis, for me, I believe 100% is like it's really connected. I don't see a way out of this alone. And I don't see how one group of people here can enjoy the cake alone. That's what we say in Arabic. Because for us, this land is more than cake. It's our souls, it's our blood, it's our ancestors. The olive trees, the moon, everything here is really, and I know what it means to a Jewish person that even didn't born here. So you can imagine also for a Palestinian like my cousin that can't even visit their land in West Bank, not in 48. So I believe the more like this denying people's rights will create just more separation, more violence. If people got their basic rights in their homeland, I believe most of the people that we are talking about, the Palestinian and Israelis, are not violent by default, by nature. They don't hate each other by default, rather the opposite. There is a lot of historical Middle East culture, like sulha, the reconciliation term in Arabic, that we can use. These are important resources to use to create a different reality that also take into consideration justice and also forgiveness and mercy. I believe this is very important to use in this journey. And I see things changing and happening, actually. The earth is changing, whether we want or not. There is no way to keep the world in control with this unjust system. And I prefer to choose these changes together and for the benefit of all the population here, that they can live here practicing their identity and in safe place.
Okay, can I add one?
Rabbi
one
Lord,
sentence?
Rabbi Lord, you're on mute. Sorry, I saw you beginning to speak.
Well, you know, that's my default method of speaking is on mute. People prefer it that way. I heard Chen say he wanted to add one thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to the last question, saying, first of all, if there is one thing that I'm proud of our journey in Combatants for Peace is that we've changed, we've transformed our psyche. I feel that I'm no longer think and feel only as an Israeli Jewish human being. So I deeply understood the way to think and to feel, not only for myself, excluding the other, which is the Palestinian. And Suli mentioned that we've traveled to North Ireland, to South Africa, to the Balkans. And I think relating to the previous surprising mass demonstration in Israel, the reality is so unexpected, you know, and everywhere we were in South Africa and the Balkans, in North Ireland, everything seemed stuck, hopelessness everywhere, no solution and so on. And overnight, things have been changed. So I'm almost sure that it will happen here. We don't know how, but we are responsible for the infrastructure of the day after.
I was going to say, I think we could fill hours with more questions because they keep coming in and they're great questions. And I'm like devastated that we don't have time to address each of them. But I want to thank you both so much for lifting up your stories, your narratives, the work that you do, your perspectives on peace, which was the name of all of these panels. And I feel okay knowing that for our community who is still hungry to ask questions and to engage and to talk more, that we will be sending out different ways that they can continue to reach out to Combatants for Peace and to the two of you and to what you do, so that they can continue to have those conversations and engage in that way, which is what all of this is about. Rabbi Berman, what I know I'm to send it to you now.
So I'm going to again thank both of our speakers and their support who have joined us in this program, and we'll say goodbye to you now. Again, thank you so much for being here. Shukran and toda rabah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And good luck to all of you there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shukran. Bye.
Thank you. We're now going to say goodbye also to our friends who have joined us from Facebook. We are ending our Facebook live stream, and we thank you all for having joined us for these panels, and hope that you have been as fulfilled and as agitated and as connected in these programs as we all have. For those who are here in our Zoom room, we are continuing on together. We will end the current recording and begin a new recording so that just for our records, we are not going to